What was the moment you realized that you shouldn't have showed up to a date? An alleged friend told me her coworker and I would be great together and wanted to do a double date at a festival with her and her husband. Date suggested he and I meet up the night before to get to know each other, and I suggested a gaming bar I'd wanted to try. Daytime arrives and he's not there. He finally shows up and tells me he had to stop home to let the dogs out so they don't mess all over the floor. Then proceeds to show me a picture of a floor covered in dog mess and says, guess it didn't work. He's still wearing his work clothes. It has been 3 hours since work ended and he went home to deal with the dogs but didn't change. He proceeds to eat the rest of the charcuterie plate I ordered by himself and then orders wings for himself. We decided to check out a game since I've now paid for more game time. He wants a Mall Madness game that is not designed for 2 people. We settled on a playable game. It's not great. As we were wrapping up, he tells me that the last date he took here did him in the parking lot. He stares at me expertly. I tell him that's not going to happen. I tell my friend I'm skipping the festival. He's shocked and thought we had a spark. Guess the only spark was the one he felt when he stepped in the dog mess. Story 2. I didn't show up for this date, but was always super proud I trusted my intuition. Had a date scheduled with a guy at a nice place downtown that I had agreed to. Right before the date, he leaves me a message saying we're going to a different place. I look it up and it's a dive bar out in the middle of nowhere. Like in a field. Alarm bells started going off. I actually really liked the guy and went back and forth with myself because I called the guy back and got his voicemail. So I leave a message apologizing profusely, but I need to reschedule the date. And I'd like to pick the place this time. Alarm bells are still going off and I end up letting his return call go to voicemail. I'm glad I do because I had to listen to it twice to believe it. This grown man proceeds to scream at me, calling me every name in the book, calling me a witch, telling me how I missed out on the best date with the best guy of my life, and then proceeds to tell me how he would have made me feel good that very night. I hadn't even been remotely intimate with him, so the comment came completely out of left field. That was the most happy I'd been. I went with my gut and skipped out on a first date. Trusting her intuition saved her from a field trip to Creepy Town. Story 3. Matched her with a girl on POF. We were talking for a while and she worked out she knew someone I had worked with in the past. I asked him what she was like and he said she's okay and not mental or anything. Little did I know he really didn't like me because I was better at the job than he was, and it was straight up lying. So I arranged a coffee date between our houses. She only lived like 5 to 10 minutes away and the nearest shopping center cafe was 10 minutes away. I arrive and wait a few minutes, and in walks this girl 10 to 15 kg heavier than her display picture with a baby in a pram. She recognized me and sat down like this was normal. The entire time we had been talking, she told me she had a daughter who was 2. I told her I had a 2-year-old son as well. Turns out her daughter was 2 months, not 2 years, and she never corrected the fact. Also, this is the first time we had met, and she asked me 5 minutes into the date if I could buy her baby formula. One look at her and I could tell she actually needed the formula and was in a desperate situation. So I bought it for her, because I didn't want her baby to starve. I politely told her it was never going to work because she straight up lied. She said, yeah, fair enough, and left. About 2 months later, I was talking to another girl in POF who happened to be friends with her. She seemed normal, and not like the complete psychopath I'm sure she was. The crazy one from the first part of the story rang me. She stalked me through my friends and told me how the second one was mental. I said I didn't believe her and she hung up on me. 10 minutes later, my messenger starts going off. It's girl number 1 sending film clips and news articles of girl number 2 having a complete psychotic break and torching her ex-boyfriend's car. On camera in a shopping center. So it all worked out well and it dodged a bigger problem because girl number 1 thought I was too nice a guy to deserve girl 2. Turns out buying a little baby formula goes a long way. Story 4. When he walked into the cafe we were meeting at with a 4L jug of water, plopped it on the counter and told the barista to use his special filtered water for the tea he was ordering. Turned out he sells these water purification machines that optimize the pH, which he insisted was not a pyramid scheme. It definitely was. After enduring his awful sales pitch, he also told me he used to be a dealer and that he turned to selling water because he's getting used to selling. He also told me how he had extremely old-fashioned values, his words, that he's a very controlling person and can't help it. He said he hates when people waste his time and is looking for a wife. Every time I tried talking about anything, he would cut me off and start talking about himself. He offered me a ride home at the end. I politely declined and ran the second I was no longer in line of sight. Story 5. I was using a dating app and this woman had messaged me first and we had a few great conversations. She was listed at 35. She suggested that we meet up, have a meal, and then see where things go. I show up to her place to pick her up and as I'm waiting, A 65-year-old woman approaches my car. She introduces herself and I ask her how old she is and she says 35. I ask to see her ID. She declines and she insists we go get a meal. I politely tell her that the start of any friendship or relationship needs honesty, and I would kindly like to know her age as it is obvious she's not 35. Keep saying she is 35. As we're driving, I'm going in circles under the pretext of going to a restaurant. I ask about her life and she gets interrupted by a phone call she must take as it is from work. She asks for me to pull over to let her talk. I do. She doesn't exit the vehicle. I was very close to leaving on the side of the street. She works as a phone psychic, and I sit there listening to her, faking it to a lady who sounds like she's in need of help, explaining they pay $9.99 the first minute of which she makes $5 and $2 every minute of which she makes $1. After her call ends, she says, "Easy $12. So I resumed driving, now headed back to her place, which I didn't realize, and I continued asking her about herself. She drops that she has a son that's 31. I break as I start laughing and say, "So you gave birth at 4? She starts mumbling about how she misspoke, but I pulled up in front of her building and politely asked her to exit the vehicle as dishonesty is a deal breaker. Story 6. Before our first ever date, which he told me he wanted to plan, I told him I had been vegetarian for a few years now, and as long as where we went had vegetarian options, I didn't mind where he was. He brought me to a steakhouse. Said he'd forgotten I'd said that. I ended up just having fries the whole night. Points to him, he did seem like he had actually forgotten, and the conversation was good, so I agreed to a second date. Now I had also told him I was caffeine intolerant. Couldn't have any coffee, Coke, most teas, etc. And where did we go? To the university coffee stand. I left to go to my archaeology class, and my desk buddy told me we were getting a new tutor, because her first one got sick and couldn't see the rest of the semester through. Guess who our new tutor was? Mr. Steakhouse and Coffee Stand guy. I maintain to this day that it was worth it all just for the look on his face when he walked into class. I wish I was making this up. Story 7. This happened to a friend of mine. I'd recently broken up with a long-term girl and was looking to get back out there, but was too cheap to pay for a dating service, so stuck to free ones. He sets up a date with a girl to come over to his place and do some hot tubbing. She shows up and wants some specific kind of drink. I'll say Goldschlager, which she didn't have, so she insists they make a store run. She seemed sketchy, so my buddy is about 50% sure he's going to get robbed, so he tells her to drive and deliberately forgets his wallet and phone at home. When he gets in the car, there's no passenger seat. She said she has a huge dog, so she took the seat out, hit to sit in the back seat. The date was late, so the closest store was closed. Rather than go back to his place, she says she knows a store that's open late. He says they're all state stores. They all close at the same time. She won't listen and they hit the highway. After a while, he starts to wonder where they're going and says, "Where's the store?" And she screams. She had forgotten he was in the car because he was in the back seat. My buddy now accepts that she's already intoxicated. She won't stop or pull over to let him drive, just keeps driving. Turns out the late store is about 30 minutes from his house, and she forgets he was in the car twice more on the strip. They got to the store and it's closed, as expected. She gets out anyway and is doing the locked door thing and yelling, "Hello?" over and over. My buddy is out of the car watching this as she starts yelling at some sketchy-looking dudes drinking 40s in the parking lot. Starts with, "Why is this store closed?" and quickly escalates. My buddy takes this as opportunity and just walks away. Doesn't even look back. Now he finds himself a 30-minute drive from home with no wallet or cell phone because he was so smart. He eventually gets a convenience store clerk to take pity on him and he calls his brother to come pick him up. He said he was worried about the chick showing up at his house, but he never heard from her again. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 8. I met this guy on Tinder. He seemed really cool. We started texting for a month or so and later planned to meet at this tavern. It was hard trying to find him because the place was packed. When I do see him, I guess he's hammered. Lol. But he didn't seem completely out of it. He was functional. I tried to ask him questions and get to know him in this sort of loud and busy space the whole time, even though he's inches away from my face and he can't hear what I'm asking or saying. Mind you, he invited me to this place. I'd never gone there before. This was supposed to be our first date. He proceeded to buy me a drink and kept touching me in the backside, quite forcefully, to be honest. This is my first time meeting him. We get a drink and he asks me, "Do you want a drink?" I told him he just bought me one. He asks this question annoyingly over and over again as if he forgot he asks. This goes on for at least an hour, all the while I'm trying to kick it with him. play some outdoor bar games and such. And he's asking, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I'm on a date with you." Lol. He asks me this question over and over as well. I don't get how anyone is that incoherent. He wasn't that hammered. He couldn't have been. Even if he was, when we texted, he seemed fairly intelligible and kind. But the whole night, he probably only asked me 2 to 3 questions. The same ones, over and over. And he kept touching me on my backside. There was a point we were going to congregate with his friends, and I sort of lost him in the crowd and left. Very rude and weird. He had the nerve to call me and asked where I went. I told him I went home. He said he wanted to get to know me, and I was like, yeah, maybe another time. Like, dude, you had the whole night to try. Had no intent to make a real effort. I blocked him. She went on a date with an NPC. Story 9. Ooh, I have one. I was 18, and a girl sent me a private message in MSN saying she got my details from my mate and wanted to go on a date with me. I asked my mate, and he said she was hot. So after talking a bit, I agreed to a date. I'd seen a photo, and she was attractive. I turned up to the cafe for the date and was approached by some girl I'd never seen with a baby. She then told me she was the girl. Looked nothing like her photo. She explained she thought I'd never go for someone who looked like her. She was right. And she left her baby with me while she went to the toilet quickly. Alarm bells started to ring after 15 minutes. I asked a waitress to check on her. To my surprise, the waitress came back and said no one was in there. I looked around the cafe and she was gone. I hadn't noticed her leaving. I didn't have any of her contact details and smartphones were not a thing, so I didn't have internet access. I phoned my mate and got him to attempt to contact her in MSN. After telling him what happened, he was surprised and had no idea. Apparently, he also thought her pictures were the real her. Another 20 minutes went and I was scared, so I asked the waitress for help. Thankfully, she was able to help and called the police. They showed up and I explained what happened. I didn't know anything about this girl, so I couldn't really help them. They said if she contacted me, to get her to contact them. I left and walked towards my car. I went past another cafe about 6 shops down, and there she was with a different guy. I went back to the police and got them to take her baby in while I watched through the window outside and waved when she looked up. Turns out I was the babysitter for her real date. Story 10. He told me to meet him at a bar, which turned out to be a hole in the wall in a mall. Literally just a bar. No food, just drinks. We were supposed to be having dinner. I'd put in some effort with a cute outfit, nice makeup, etc. We showed up in ratty old jeans and a paint-splattered hoodie. That was the moment that made me think, ooh, this is gonna be bad. But he'd already caught me. So he sat down and the bartender immediately put a pint-glass tonic in front of him before even asking what he wanted. Clearly he was a regular. We tried to make small talk, but he was just so weird. He was cutting me off mid-sentence with random nonsense. Buddy hitting me in the arm and kept hurrying me to finish my drink so I could keep up with him. He was slamming these pints of tonic, one after the other. The bartender kept him coming. I finished my one light drink, paid for it, which offended him deeply, and got up to leave. He chugged his last drink, threw a $100 bill in the bar, and followed me into the parking lot. I tried to get away politely, and he interrupted with, "Come back to my place. I do it like a freight train." I stumbled over my, no thank you. And before I'd finished the sentence, he got in his car, started the engine, and screeched out of the parking lot, almost getting it onto 2 wheels in the turn. There were some interesting characters back in the early days of online dating. 2004 was like the Wild West. Story 11. I went on a date with this guy on Tinder. He was a coworker of one of my friends, so I figured he'd be alright. First date was decent enough, so we went on a second. This date was also going well until I mentioned his pentagram necklace, asking if he just liked the design or if he was pagan. Either did not wear this necklace to the first date or it had been under his shirt. He replied pagan, and I said how I found the pagan religion to be very interesting and was hoping to hear more about it. Oh boy, I wish I didn't. He had been fairly shy up until that point. He did a complete 180 and started going on, very loudly in this fairly nice restaurant, about how his mother could physically heal people just with touch, and about how his friend was in the army and got shot in the leg but didn't feel any pain from it because my date had linked minds with him from across the world and took all the pain from him instead. I managed to get through the day when I got home. A message to say it wasn't working out, that I didn't feel any spark after 2 dates, and wished him well. He immediately blocked me. I then messaged my friend, who was his coworker, asking if the pagan talk was normal for him. Friend calls me to cry from laughter over the phone about how he and all the other coworkers knew he was crazy, but also knew he was harmless, so wanted to see how I'd react to him. It was a bit cruel on my friend's part to not warn me, especially since he knew I was going on these dates, but I definitely wasn't going on a third regardless. Story 12. One of my first attempts at online dating many years ago. The girl wasn't very bright, but she was really nice and absolutely beautiful, judging by the pictures she'd sent me. As a little background, she told me she was 5'2" and worked out, and had an average to slim body. I didn't think anything of her telling me her height because she asked me mine, and that's not always easily deduced from photos. But her telling me that she worked out and had an average or slim body was odd because that was clear from the photos. After a couple of weeks, we set a time and place to meet. I arrived at a park near a gazebo she said she would be at. I looked through my windshield, but all I saw was this really tall, obese woman wearing pajamas standing inside. She was easily 6'4" or 6'5", certainly taller than I was. Thought maybe she was late because clearly there was no 5'2" petite female inside, so I called her. Then I see the woman's flip phone light up and play a song I didn't recognize, and she answered. It was her. She said, "I see you." I immediately hung up and started walking towards my car. That was the moment I knew I'd wasted an hour of my time driving out to meet a stranger. I hit the lock before she could open the door and rolled down the window with a, "Do I know you?" She said something along the lines of, "Yeah, I'm a bit taller than I said." I apologized, said I had to go, and I pulled away. Tall, obese women have never been my type, but even if they were, starting out any relationship in an easily verified lie is a gigantic red flag. She texted me a minute or so later and told me it was messed up for me to make her get ready to go out just to leave her hanging. Her version of getting ready was putting on old, unwashed pajamas. I ended up hanging out with some friends I hadn't seen in years that happened to live 20 minutes away, so it wasn't a total loss. I dodged that nonetheless. Story 13. This would have been in late 2011, early 2012, when Plenty of Fish was still a popular online dating option. This would have been my second, and last, date from online dating. I chatted with this one woman for a few days. She had similar interests, and her picture made her seem pretty cute, so I was interested. The day before our date, she admitted the picture of her was actually her friend and sent me a pic of her from the bridge of her nose up. She had pretty eyes, and I understood the shyness of putting her actual picture out there, so I still went on the date. Her face was pear-shaped, to put it bluntly. She was kind of slim, but also chubby in places you don't really think of when you hear chubby. Anyways, we sat and had coffee, and she only wanted to rant about her mom and little brother and how unfair it is that she had to watch him the previous night. Considering our online convos were about video games, music, and TV shows we liked, this was a complete 180 for her. I tried steering the convo to anything else, but she persisted. We both would have been 21 at the time. I left and told her we weren't a good match. Then I deleted my profile later that night. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.